Next up, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Astrid Williams, an accomplished public health expert and an advocate for beauty justice. As the Director of Programs and Initiatives for the California Black Health Network, today she'll be leading a critical discussion on the health risks posed by toxic ingredients in beauty products, particularly those marketed to Black women. Dr. Williams will share the mission of the Conscious Black Beauty Movement, which empowers Black women to make safer, healthier choices in their beauty routines. She'll also explore how education and advocacy can drive change and promote safer beauty standards. Let's welcome Dr. Astrid Williams.
Thank you so much, Tia. And as I am trying to share, the screen looks Black on my end, so I'm assuming it's Black on your end as well. So do apologize. Yes. Great, that works even better. Thank you so much. So thank you all for having me. And on behalf of California Black Health Network and our Executive Director, Rhonda Smith, we are so gracious to be able to have the opportunity to share with you about our Conscious Black Beauty Movement, which is one of our valued initiatives through the California Black Health Network. Next slide here. Just to go in a little bit about our organization and who we are. And so we are the trusted voice, as we would like to say, throughout the state of California and beyond for all Black immigrants and African Americans leading the efforts around health equity. So only statewide organization that's doing this work around health equity, health disparities, reduction and improvement for that. And how do we go about this work is a variety of different ways. We do it through outreach, education, as opportunities that avail like this, being able to be out in the community, whether it be virtual or in person. We also do a little bit of community activation in terms of advocacy and policy. So did appreciate and coming in on the tail end of Dr. Michaela Martinez's presentation about what you all can do in terms of, supporting greater bills and legislations for regulating the industry. And so we do that as well as uplifting, the movement around understanding the critical issues that lie at the hands of health disparities and how we can close that gap and lengthening the longevity of our lifespan as we live. And we do that through the critical lens of the intersections between racial justice, social justice, and as we have here, environmental justice. Thank you. Next slide. So quickly before we get into the presentation, just to level set and let you know a little bit about our vision and our mission. And so as I shared earlier, we want to ensure that every African American and Black immigrant has equal and fair opportunity to live long, healthy, sustainable lives free of inequities and health disparities. And we do that through our mission to ensure that no matter where you live, what gender, what your housing status is, or immigration status, that you have equal and fair opportunity to primary behavioral and healthcare services, being able to avoid succumbing through these diseases. And as we're going to talk about today, or just highlight today, our Conscious Black Beauty Movement is around the issue of reproductive health and what that looks like. So next slide. So how do we go about the Conscious Black Beauty Movement? We came about this through our involvement in the Non-Toxic Black Beauty project that is in part raised up through the Campaign for Safe Cosmetics, as was shared earlier, through Breast Cancer Prevention Partners. But we felt the need to be able to expand upon that. And so, yes, wonderful work and great strides are being made in terms of cosmetic regulation, but we also identified to need to further that work in the community as it relates to not only cosmetics, personal care, but also fashion as well, because there are similar implications as it relates to the fashion industry. As we all know, we're in the advent of fast fashion and what that does, not only for us personally, in terms of the products that we're putting on our body and the most intimate portions of our body, if you think of the undergarments, but also what we're doing into, the earth and climate. And so being mindful of that in terms of the overall movement. And we do this through a variety of different ways through our partnership. And so we work with a lot of faith-based organizations, churches, Black sororities, as we know, has been very, engaging and coming forward as a movement, as well. Civic organizations and beauty professionals. So in the bill that Dr. Martinez alluded to earlier, there is a suite of 4 bills. In particular, there's one, HR 3620, which is one for women of color and for beauty professionals, because we do know that they bear an undue burden through the nature of the work that they do. It's more of chronic, exposures to the, chemicals, ingredients, and also, respiratory conditions, and also health conditions as it relates to different, reproductive conditions as well. And so being able to uplift that. And so recognizing that beauty professionals is one of those areas that is, unforeseen, not tapped in enough, as well as individuals as you all joining us today. And so being able to rally around and be champions, we do have a very robust ambassador program where we know that we, can have a further reach out in the community with our, partners and individuals. And so we train them to be able to go back into their respective communities. And we all have, a level of influence, even if it's just with your inner circle, your sister circle, your families, your relatives, your colleagues. And so being able to be equipped with the education and information to be able to share out is what, being an ambassador is all about. And attending various events and symposiums and conferences is able to help us to further our mission as well. Next slide. So if we define, why this is an issue, as we look at our conscious Black beauty movement, we recognize that it's some of this, deeply rooted, causes and the societal, that propagates or instigates the problem as it relates to standards here. And so, as we all know, nothing new here is that, in the media, if you look anywhere, you will see that something is being marketed or promoted to you. And oftentimes, if you are a person of color, it's someone that, has this standard of being, Eurocentric, ideal standards, whether it's in terms of our hair, and having the message about having straight hair with hair relaxers, or either if it's body features in terms of our face, use of skin lightening creams as such, to be able to try to attain this standard of ideal of what it means to look like in America and and beyond. So recognizing that there are systemic, racial or racist harm that is done, and also it's environmental as well. So it's environmental injustice, as we commonly relate to this as a beauty justice as well. So next slide. And so if we look at the environmental injustice of beauty, I'm sure most of you all or may be new to some, is that it is a billion-dollar industry, 7.5 to be exact. And this number or variations of it have been touted in, various parts of, research, the media out there. But as we all know, and it stands, it's a very lucrative business. And as I, share often in these presentations, is that we are dying at the cost of beauty. Literally and physically, we're spinning into this, industry in terms of personal care and cosmetics, and even 9 times as more as it relates to hair care products. And so how that, relates to, health harm or, health outcomes is that we are succumbing, to some of these diseases, in terms of breast cancer. As Black women, we all know that, how the incidence, however, we're not the highest. And unfortunately, that gap is closing between other racial ethnicities. We are the racial group that dies, at the highest, amount and has the most aggressive form of breast cancer. So being cognizant of that and being, aware or conscious as we, come about this movement and looking at, the products that we're using and being conscious and informed about, what practices and behaviors that we're engaging in. And so as it shares here, compared to white women, we have a higher toxin load. And so we carry that, through environmental exposures. Breast cancer research studies have shown that we may have thought that, genetics, play a larger role, but it's more so the environment. Less than 10% can be attributed to, genetic or hereditary. So what does that open up and leave? 90% is in the environment. And that can be, in a variety of different ways, where you live, place-based, what you're exposed to, relating back to, industries, your occupation, and also the products, that you're using. So being mindful of that, we just definitely want to, have a, conscious, informed decisions about those choices that we're making during this by raising awareness. So, next slide. So I said all of that before, basically highlighting, the conscious Black beauty movement. So I think at this point you are, seeing why we're very passionate about the movement and being intentional and calling it a movement as such. And so it's not a program where maybe it might be short-lived, or but a movement is something that is larger and more, has more bandwidth and long, standing for that. So being able to equip Black women and girls with the education and knowledge about being beautiful from the inside and out. And so what does that mean? So again, what we consume in our body and also place on our bodies as well. And so this is where we are in terms of our conscious Black beauty movement. And so as I progress to the next few slides here, because I know I have limited time, but definitely would love to, share, have the opportunity for you all to join us, in this movement and learn more. So these next few slides here will give you more about what we are engaging in and what's on the horizon for the future. So if we look at our goal here and what we aim to achieve in terms of our conscious Black beauty movement, we would love to see a day where we can envision where you go into your big box store, beauty supply as such, and being able to pull off the shelf and being, confident in that it's not going to, be something that's harmful. In today's world, right there, you may think as a consumer, if it's on the shelf, that it's safe. And that's not the case due to poor regulation on there. And so being able to work, with beauty professionals, manufacturers, brand owners, to be able to educate them, and also policy as well, as we know, to be able to have these standards where, products are free of, harmful chemicals and toxins. And so being able to provide Black women with these educational opportunities to learn more about the products, providing resources. So there's a wealth of resources that are out there just right on, in your hands, in your phones. And so there's resources that you can find and online, and I can share more at the end, tail end of the discussion here. But next slide. So what is our solutions to this? And so we're recognizing that there is an issue or there is a concern. And so our solution is through our movement with the Conscious Black Beauty movement. And so as we walk through that, I'll take you along with the journey. So next slide. And so we have four key pillars, which we'll go into. So this is section header for the next slide here. And we identified, in order to be successful in the work that we're doing, there's four key pillars that help us, engage in this work, that outlines here as awareness, education, research, and policy. Touched on many of these thus far, but the awareness relates to, having this initiative, and we do look to have a kickoff or a launch in early spring of next year, 2025. So definitely do stay in contact and in touch with us to learn more about that. It'll be in Los Angeles, California, and also with that is that we know that, as I mentioned before, each of us have a level of influence, but also we know in this day and age that we live in that we are heavily marketed to, and there is social media in terms of social media influencers, and so reaching out to those and having those be our champions to be able to go back to their respective audiences, to be able to share more about how to identify what, particular products to, steer clear for, from chemicals of concerns. So we can use their voice to be able to magnify ours, and being able to partner, create strategic partnerships. Education, as we are doing here as such, we do have, trainers, also other opportunities to be able to engage in, whether that be through virtual events or in person. And as I shared earlier, a variety of different stakeholders that we have in the community. And so research, just to touch on this briefly, we've had great opportunities, before us. We're participating in one led by the California Breast Cancer Research Prevention Program, where we're looking particularly at the feminine care products that Black women are using, because we know that can be a precursor as well to breast cancer. And then also one specifically about prevention that relates to gene, genome, and exomes. And so really excited about those projects that we're engaging on the horizon. I touched briefly on the Safer Beauty Bill package, and I know I'm quickly going through this because I know I'm getting the time reminder for this, but and as it relates to policy, being able to uplift and support, advocacy efforts in that. As we sit here in the state of California, there is definitely a relevance to, the progressiveness and the transparency around fragrance and flavors in that. And so definitely highlighting, those policy efforts as well. So next slide. And so just here, as I close out, showing, what does it look like in action? And so our Conscious Black Beauty movement, it has been comprised of various, opportunities and events, and just wanted to highlight some of those in the next slide here. So one of the events that we had earlier this summer was a great one, was the Beauty of Business. And so we partnered with the Los Angeles chapter of the Black MBA Association. And this was a panel of about 4 individuals that were powerhouse in the industry, from Gabrielle Union's personal hairstylist, who patched in live stream. He was originally going to be in person in the panel, as we know, with beauty and in fashion industry. Gabrielle Union was on set, on location for an event, and so he was there, and he was still committed, and so he was able to, share what his experience in working in, as a hairstylist in the industry, as well as having Sienna Naturals, co-founder with Issa Rae, Hannah Diop, Akilah Relaford. She's also been featured in Essence. She has Mary Louise Cosmetics, and then Felicia Leatherwood, who's the personal hairstylist to Issa Rae. So that they were on the panel to be able to share with us. And so that's where you see our executive executive director, sharing as we closed out the session. Here also shows our ambassador office hours, where we had a neuropathic dermatologist over the summer as well share out, how to be healthy from the inside in, which gave a very unique perspective, that we haven't necessarily heard from a dermatologist. Usually they like to prescribe, but doing it more holistically. And then also we had a listening session just as of last week that we uplifted, to find out about, the feminine care products that Black women use. So next slide. So all of this leads to, ultimate goal is to provide healthier outcomes for all of us. And so being able to band together to be able to uplift this movement, definitely, hopefully, that you will help us to achieve our goal through that, being more conscious, making informed choices through awareness, opportunities for education and engagement and research, and as alike. And so next slide, we'll share, how you can become one of our, valued partners and stakeholders in this movement. And so if we go to that, is so if I leave you in parting words here, is how to be anti-toxic in a toxic world. So we know we're faced with so many challenges, as I mentioned, in just the environment each day. And so just being mindful about that, choosing better, being informed, being aware, being educated, and being able to share that, with your networks definitely makes a world of difference. And so next slide here is joining the movement. And so have our contact information on socials. We're online at Your CBHN, which is for California Black Health Network, as well as my contact information, I believe, in the next slide. is the QR code, so we'll just leave it here. Also, I'm sure our contact information will be shared with all the body of the group here today, but if you want to take a quick scan of the QR code to learn more about our Conscious Black Beauty movement. So hopefully we are able to provide a unique perspective from, research to policy, what other organizations are doing in this space as a nonprofit working here in California, and hoping to have a greater reach even nationally, the need to join a movement as such through the Conscious Black Beauty movement. So, thank you. Next slide. So that is our presentation here. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Williams, for sharing the work of the Conscious Black Beauty movement. I am so excited to get us ready for our questions. So I want to open up the floor right now and invite all of our guests to pop their questions into the chat. But until we get their questions, I'll go ahead and get us started. So, Dr. Williams, you mentioned the connection between beauty, fashion, and toxins. How does the Conscious Black Beauty movement, or CBBM, plan to engage and educate the younger generation of Black women and girls about safer beauty practices, specifically in fashion? And then the second part would be, what's the relationship to toxins and fashion, if any?
Yes, love the questions. And so I'll take the first part there in reaching the younger generation, because really, they're very impactful, and in the world, as I mentioned today, heavily influenced, by societal impacts. And so working through social influencers, we're in the process right now where we're creating our strategy. It's a 2-year strategy that we're starting out with, and having those networks of social influencers to go back to their audiences. And so working in the beauty and the fashion space, because there are, definitely fashion influencers as well. We have YouTube reaching out to being able to, provide videos. Also, TikTok is a very, rampant one as well. And so these are where the younger generations. And so having those networks where we can engage with them definitely would be a great opportunity to tap in, to be able to educate them, because we know that peers are very influential. And so at a younger age, they may not listen to us, but they'll listen to their peers. And so being appealing to them, being able to equip them with the information. And then I guess going into your second part of the question, what are the implications of fashion? And so I love that as well, is because we don't talk about this often enough. And so we think about, beauty, but also if we think about the individual as a whole, what do? We all are here, wearing, some type of apparel. And so it has greater implications in terms of a variety of impacts. And so the toxins can be in the chemicals, in the dyes, that are used to create these vibrant colors that are in there. But also it can, harm the waterways, the wildlife, the natural, environment as well. So being mindful of Mother Earth and the climate. And then looking at the whole life cycle of a garment, which is something that we don't think about often enough as a consumer. When we go into the store, we have one mission and goal, and that is to find something. But looking at it from the start, so the infancy stage and how it's created, what is the labor practices also that's engaged? Unfortunately, if we look at the labor industry in terms of manufacturing for garments, oftentimes, and if we look at abroad, it's women and children. And so also, women of color. And so being mindful of that as well in terms of manufacturing practices, but also looking at in terms of, where they're also being the transportation industry in the cities or the communities that these industries are placed in, the exhaust that comes from that, the petrochemicals, the gases and things that Dr. Martinez, referred to. That also, coincides in the fashion industry as well. And so we don't talk about this, as enough. And I'll just close out here in terms of going back to, as I said, too, the harm that it can have, where we're putting it in our most intimate, places such as undergarments, bras, undergarments such as panties and things of that nature. When you perspire, our organs, the largest organ is our skin. And so those can go into, our bodies as well. And so hopefully that answers, a question a little bit more about the fashion and how we can, do better.
Absolutely. You know, when I was listening to you talk, I was thinking about the influencer, since we're talking about influencers, who said, very mindful, very demure.
Oh yeah, yes, and it's still trending now. It's so
And
yes, yes,
he is, it's trending, or she is
yes,
trending rather. So
yes.
I want to ask you that question, since we're talking about influencers. How can influencers and beauty professionals and consumers really collaborate to amplify the impact of the conscious Black beauty movement and hold these beauty industries accountable for safer standards? I mean, accountability is key. So how can we go about doing that collectively?
Yeah, so first part to that is banding together, as I mentioned. I would group them all into, the same bucket, beauty, whether it be beauty, influencers, hair care, fashion, they're all, doing something as a consumers what we're buying. And that goes back to the 7.5, billion-dollar industry. And so what our goal is through the Conscious Black Beauty Movement is to, mobilize, the social influencers, having a social toolkit that we can create, that they can, have the information to go back out to their audiences to be able to project that. So that's one, recognize the level of social influence. And then the second is, what can we do is holding these industries accountable. I'm sure we've heard stories about the Shein's, the Fashion Novas, and, all of these other fast fashion industries. But really, doing an expose, so to say, is it's like, how can they do better? And oftentimes, not to put them on the spot, but these larger companies do know that what they're doing and the harm that they're providing, to the environment, and also the labor. You can't exclude the labor practices as well. So how can they do better? So being able to provide them with the information so that they can have best practices, so that they can have standards that they can use to be able to, do better in terms of the industry. So hopefully we can, be able to crack into that industry, and that they would be able to be open and amenable to making changes.
Yeah. And I find it very interesting because just yesterday I was in a meeting. And we were talking about the research, around breast cancer, specifically for, Black individuals or people of color, and thinking about how some of these companies pour dollars into researching breast cancer, but unfortunately, some of their products, may be actually causing breast cancer. And so, going back to the accountability that is so important for us to come together as a community and really address this so that we can save our lives. But we're running out of time, or we're out of time rather. But I just want to say again, thank you so much for joining us today. The conversation was so critical, it was so important, and I've learned a lot. And I'm looking forward to supporting the Conscious Black Beauty Movement. And again, thank you so much, Dr. Williams. We truly appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Well, everyone, as we come to the close of day 2, I really want to express my deepest gratitude to each and every one of you for joining us today. Your presence, your engagement, and your commitment to creating a safer and healthier future for Black women and girls truly, truly make a difference. Today, we tackled some heavy but essential topics, from understanding the power of policy to protect us from harmful chemicals, to exploring legislation like the Crown Act and the Safer Beauty Bill package. We've seen how advocacy and legislation action can drive real change in our lives and our communities. Before we go, I have a few important reminders. If you haven't yet, be sure to register for day 3. We'll be focused on how to become more conscious consumers with practical tools and insights on how to protect our health. And also, please take a moment to complete our evaluation. This is critical for improving our future programs and securing funding to keep these conversations going. And I also want you to head over to Breast Cancer Prevention Partners website, and we'll post that in the chat for you, to learn more about and support the Safer Beauty Bill package. Your voice can help push these important protections forward. And don't forget, lastly, to sound the Crown Act, the Crown Coalition petition, to continue the fight against hair discrimination. And for those receiving CE credits, make sure to fill out the evaluation and include your 𝐤𝐳 ID. I want to say thank you again for showing up, for sharing, and for being a part of this journey. We're in this together. And I can't wait to see you on day 3 as we continue to empower ourselves and our community. Well, that's it for today. I'll let the credits roll and give thanks to all that helped today and the symposium series come together. Have a good day. Take care, everyone.